In 1968, a 33-year-old actor flew to Yugoslavia to film a World War II comedy. Instead, he ended up in a hospital bed in Novi Sad, unconscious. And for a few seconds, he died there. The telegram arrived at his wife's home with the kind of message that doesn't leave room for interpretation. Her husband was in a coma in Yugoslavia. She should come immediately. He might not survive until she arrived. Just weeks earlier, he had boarded the plane for what looked like a straightforward job. It was supposed to be fun, a quick job, then back home. But somewhere along the Danube River, he picked up something invisible and deadly. Pneumococcus bacteria. Spinal meningitis took hold. The infection attacked the protective membranes surrounding his brain and spinal cord. There was no gradual warning, no time to prepare. One moment, he was preparing for scenes with Clint Eastwood and Telly Savalas. The next, he was being rushed to a hospital, slipping away from consciousness. The hospital did everything it could. But in 1968, Yugoslavia, the antibiotics he desperately needed simply weren't available. His condition deteriorated rapidly, and then he fell into a coma. For 6 weeks, he existed somewhere between life and death. Nurses performed 7 spinal taps, trying to fight the meningitis. People would enter his white hospital room, look at him, and start crying. Years later, he would recall every conversation. When you're in a coma, he later explained, you can hear, you remember. Talk to them, sing to them, they're listening. And somewhere in that in-between space, he died. Not almost. For a few seconds, his heart stopped. Brain activity ceased. What happened next, he would describe over and over in the decades that followed. Always with the same details, and the same sense that he'd seen something he couldn't quite file away. I saw the blue tunnel, he said, and I started going down it. I saw the white light. This was years before thousands of people would report similar near-death experience accounts. In 1968, he just knew he was dying. Standing behind his own right shoulder, he watched his comatose body slide peacefully down toward the light. Just let go. Stop fighting. Everything will be fine. He almost gave in. I didn't want to go, he admitted. But it was incredibly tempting. You just go, oh, shit man, why not? And then he said something else later that helps explain why this moment mattered to him. He had been fighting for his life since he was old enough to remember. When he was barely 2 years old, polio struck him. Most children who contracted polio in the 1930s either died or were left permanently paralyzed. He survived. Then came rheumatic fever, severe enough that he missed an entire year of school, confined to bed while the disease attacked his heart. Then pneumonia, then scarlet fever. By the time he was a teenager, he had already survived more serious illness than most people face in a lifetime. And then, he recalled, just as I was seconds away from succumbing to the seductions of that matte white light, glowing purely at what appeared to be the bottom of it, but some primal force fiercely grabbed my feet and compelled them to dig my heels in. He dug his heels in. He refused. The downward journey slowed and stopped, he said. I'd been on my way to being dead, when some memory of the desperate rigor I'd applied to survive All my childhood illnesses pulled me back, forced me to live. He came back. Back in Yugoslavia, director Brian G. Hutton refused to recast the role. They'd built a 6-week hiatus into his contract, a stroke of luck that became a lifeline. The studio could have moved on, reshot scenes with someone healthy and available. Instead, they waited. MGM flew him from Yugoslavia to Charing Cross Hospital in England. Better facilities, better antibiotics, a better chance. But 6 weeks isn't enough time to recover from bacterial meningitis that nearly killed you. When the 6-week hiatus ended, MGM pulled him out of the hospital and brought him back to Yugoslavia. He later described his condition with a kind of blunt precision. "I'd recovered," he said. "Sort of. I could walk and talk," he explained. "But my brains were truly fried." The person who came back was neurologically different from the one who'd left. He was afraid to sleep. He wept without warning or reason. He was terrified of heights, terrified of water. He had grown up on the coast of Nova Scotia and loved the ocean. Now accounts describe him as paralyzed with fear at the sight of it. But he went back to work, in the very country that had nearly killed him, and he finished what he'd started. He played oddball, the philosophical tank commander with the laid-back attitude and hippie sensibilities. More than 50 years later, military veterans still quote Oddball's lines. Kelly's Heroes, released in 1970, became a beloved classic, one of those rare war comedies that actually works. And Oddball became the kind of iconic character actors dream of creating. Weird, memorable, quotable. But he was just getting started. That same year, he starred as Hawkeye Pierce in Robert Altman's MASH, the anti-war satire that would shape how a generation thought about Vietnam-era conflict. Then came Clute, in 1971, where his controlled performance opposite Jane Fonda earned critical acclaim. Then Nicholas Roeg's Don't Look Now in 1973. And there's a detail people still point to. By then, he was terrified of water, and he agreed to film the entire movie in Venice, a city built on water specifically to confront that fear. In the 1990s, he delivered one of cinema's most memorable supporting performances in Oliver Stone's JFK. In 2012, at age 77, he became President Snow in the Hunger Games franchise. Accounts from that period describe young viewers approaching him on the street with a mix of fear and awe, because his portrayal of Snow was so quietly sadistic. Through it all, he never won a competitive Academy Award, not even a nomination. But in 2017, at age 82, the Academy gave him an honorary Oscar for Lifetime Achievement. In his acceptance speech, he was characteristically self-deprecating. He quoted Jack Benny. "I don't deserve this, but I have arthritis, and I don't deserve that either." The room erupted in laughter and applause. On June 20th, 2024, he died under hospice care at the University of Miami Hospital. He was 88 years old. His son Kiefer, himself a respected actor, announced his father's death with a statement that was widely shared. "With a heavy heart, I tell you that my father, Donald Sutherland, has passed away," he wrote. "I personally think one of the most important actors in the history of film. Never daunted by a role, good, bad, or ugly." He loved what he did and did what he loved, and one can never ask for more than that. A life well lived. A life well lived. Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau called him one of the greats. Jane Fonda, Helen Mirren, Jennifer Lawrence, and many others shared memories of working with a man known for depth and humanity on screen. But one way to measure the shape of his life is to go back, 56 years earlier. Back to that hospital in Yugoslavia. Back to the moment his heart stopped. He saw the blue tunnel. He felt the seductive peace of letting go. Instead, he came back to life, returned to the country that nearly killed him, and finished the film. Then he kept going. For decades, it had been 47 years since Yugoslavia. He was 80 years old. "I died for a few seconds," he said simply. "Saw the blue tunnel, dug my feet in." Matter of fact, that was Donald Sutherland. What followed that moment in Yugoslavia wasn't a single triumph. It was work. Nearly 200 performances spread across 6 decades. Films that shaped how war, power, paranoia, authority, and dissent were portrayed on screen. Characters that stayed with people long after the credits rolled. He didn't become important because he survived. He became important because he kept showing up afterward. Directors returned to him for roles that required restraint, for performances that suggested history rather than explaining it. You can trace that presence through generations of cinema. And behind all of it sits a single interruption in 1968. A moment when his heart stopped, when the work could have ended. It didn't. Donald Sutherland didn't turn that experience into a message. The significance of his life isn't that he saw the tunnel. It's that he came back and spent the rest of his time building something that lasted. Not louder, not faster, just longer. And in the end, that was enough.